The crystal-clear water of the Oceanview Country Club pool reflected the California sun as I stood frozen at the edge, clutching my beach towel like armor. Brittany Morrison's perfectly manicured finger pointed directly at me while her voice carried across the poolside lounge with surgical precision. "Seriously, Maya, maybe a one-piece would be more appropriate for someone with your body type," she announced, her words dripping with false concern as Stephanie Walsh and Ashley Parker nodded in synchronized agreement behind their oversized designer sunglasses. What none of these women knew as they exchanged knowing glances and whispered comments about my audacity to wear a bikini at their precious country club was that the same body they were criticizing had once graced the covers of magazines they probably kept hidden in their walk-in closets. What they couldn't see beneath their layers of judgment and insecurity was that the woman they were trying to humiliate had earned more money in a single photo shoot than they spent on their monthly shopping sprees. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But first, let me take you back to how I found myself standing poolside at one of Malibu's most exclusive country clubs, about to experience a moment that would change everything I thought I knew about confidence, authenticity, and the power of staying true to who you really are. My name is Maya Chen, and 3 months ago, I thought I had successfully buried my past life so deep that no one would ever discover the truth about who I used to be. At 32, I had convinced myself that my days of confidence and self-assurance were behind me, replaced by the comfortable anonymity of being Jake Chen's wife and mother to our 7-year-old daughter, Emma. The woman who once commanded attention on runways and photo sets had transformed into someone who preferred blending into the background, choosing safety over spotlight. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was hiding my former career at a place where most women would kill to have even a fraction of the success I'd achieved. As I folded Emma's swim gear into our monogrammed beach bag that morning, preparing for what was supposed to be a relaxing family day at the club, I had no idea that within hours my carefully constructed facade would crumble in the most spectacular way possible. Jake emerged from our walk-in closet, adjusting his golf shirt and checking his watch with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to country club social dynamics. After 5 years of marriage, I'd grown to love his predictable routines and genuine kindness, though he remained blissfully unaware of the life I'd lived before we met at that coffee shop in Santa Monica. As far as my husband knew, Maya Chen had always been exactly what she appeared to be, a devoted wife and mother who enjoyed yoga classes and volunteering at Emma's school. "Ready for another thrilling day of poolside politics?" Jake asked with a grin, though his tone carried a hint of concern. He'd noticed how tense I became before our visits to Oceanview, attributing my anxiety to normal social pressures rather than the deeper truth about my discomfort with being around women who seemed to thrive on competition and comparison. I managed a smile while sliding my cover-up over the navy bikini I'd chosen, specifically because it was understated and classic. The two-piece had been a compromise with myself, a small rebellion against the increasingly conservative swimwear I'd been gravitating toward since joining the country club scene. Something about Brittany Morrison's crowd made me want to disappear, to make myself smaller and less noticeable, though I couldn't articulate why their opinions mattered so much. "Emma's so excited about swim lessons with Coach Tyler," I replied, deflecting his question while gathering sunscreen and magazines I probably wouldn't read. Our daughter had been talking about the pool all week, her enthusiasm infectious enough to make me forget my own reservations about spending the afternoon surrounded by the Oceanview elite. The drive through Malibu's winding coastal roads usually calmed my nerves, but today the Pacific Ocean views felt more like a reminder of everything I'd given up than a source of peace. Jake chatted about his golf game while Emma bounced in her car seat, practicing her backstroke technique in the air. I stared out the window at mansions perched on cliff tops, each one representing the kind of wealth and status that Oceanview members wore like badges of honor. Oceanview Country Club sprawled across 30 acres of prime oceanfront property, its Mediterranean-style architecture and manicured gardens creating an atmosphere of casual luxury that had intimidated me from the moment Jake first brought me here as his fiancé. The Azure Pool complex sat at the heart of the social scene, surrounded by cabanas that cost more to rent for a season than most people's annual salaries. This was where reputations were made and destroyed over mimosas and gossip, where the wrong swimsuit or misplaced comment could result in social exile. Robert Sterling, the club's impeccably dressed manager, greeted us at the entrance with the kind of professional warmth that made everyone feel like valued members, while maintaining subtle hierarchies that ensured certain families received extra attention. He'd always been kind to me, though I suspected he found my reluctance to embrace the club's social dynamics puzzling for someone married to Jake, whose family had been members for 3 generations. "Mrs. Chen, wonderful to see you again," Robert said, his smile genuine as he handed Emma a complimentary juice box. "I believe Coach Tyler is already setting up for the junior swim clinic, and the pool area is particularly lovely today. Perfect for relaxing." As we made our way through the club's marble-floored corridors, passing oil paintings of founding members and trophy cases filled with decades of golf tournament victories, I caught glimpses of the life I might have had if I'd made different choices. These women lunching on the terrace, discussing charity galas and private school admissions, represented a version of success that society expected me to aspire to. Yet something about their perfectly curated lives felt hollow compared to the raw creativity and independence I'd once known. The Azure Pool complex opened before us like a scene from a luxury resort magazine, all infinity edges and carefully positioned palm trees designed to frame the Pacific Ocean beyond. Families occupied prime lounging spots, while servers in crisp, white uniforms circulated with refreshments and poolside service. The atmosphere hummed with the kind of relaxed affluence that money could buy, where every detail was orchestrated to create effortless elegance. Emma immediately spotted her swim coach and ran toward the shallow end, her excitement infectious enough to make several other parents smile. Tyler Johnson, a former Olympic hopeful who'd transitioned into teaching, had a gift for making every child feel capable and confident in the water. Watching Emma's face light up as she practiced her strokes, I remembered what it felt like to pursue something I loved without worrying about others' opinions. Jake headed toward the golf course, after ensuring Emma was settled, leaving me to navigate the social dynamics of poolside afternoon alone. This was usually when my anxiety peaked, faced with the prospect of making conversation with women who seemed to speak in code about topics I couldn't quite grasp. Designer handbags became status symbols, charity committee positions transformed into power plays, and every interaction carried undercurrents I struggled to interpret. I claimed 2 lounge chairs near the deep end, positioning myself where I could watch Emma's lesson while maintaining a safe distance from the established social groups. The navy bikini felt appropriate and modest under my white cover-up, chosen specifically to avoid drawing attention or criticism. After 3 years of membership, I'd learned to dress defensively, prioritizing acceptance over personal expression. Brittany Morrison arrived with her usual entourage, their designer swimwear and matching accessories creating a coordinated display of wealth and taste that commanded immediate attention. Brittany's success as an interior designer for celebrity clients had earned her unofficial leadership of Oceanview's social hierarchy, a position she wielded with the precision of someone accustomed to controlling environments and people. Her honey blonde hair caught the sunlight as she surveyed the pool area like a queen surveying her kingdom. Stephanie Walsh and Ashley Parker flanked her with practiced synchronization, their roles as loyal supporters clearly defined through years of friendship built on mutual benefit and shared targets. Stephanie's husband owned a chain of high-end restaurants throughout Los Angeles, while Ashley had married into old California money that traced back to early Hollywood royalty. Together, they formed a triumvirate that could make or break social, standing at Oceanview with a few well-placed comments. "Maya, darling," Brittany called out with the kind of false warmth that made my stomach clench. "How lovely to see you here on such a beautiful day." That cover-up is absolutely adorable." The compliment felt like a trap, though I couldn't explain why. Everything about Brittany's tone suggested hidden meanings that I wasn't sophisticated enough to decode. I managed a polite smile while arranging my towel and magazine, hoping to project confidence I didn't feel. "Thank you, Brittany. The weather is perfect for swimming," I replied, immediately regretting how generic my response sounded. These women spoke in layers of subtext that I'd never mastered, leaving me feeling perpetually off balance in their presence. Ashley tilted her oversized hat to get a better look at my outfit, her assessment subtle but unmistakable. "Are you planning to swim today? The water temperature is supposed to be ideal." The question seemed innocent enough, but something in her tone suggested she was fishing for information about my intentions. I nodded toward Emma, who was practicing her kicks with Coach Tyler's encouragement. "I might join Emma for a bit after her lesson," I said, unconsciously adjusting my cover-up to ensure everything was properly concealed. Stephanie exchanged a glance with Brittany that I pretended not to notice, though their silent communication sent familiar waves of insecurity through my chest. This was how it always went with them. Subtle exchanges that made me feel like I was missing crucial information, like everyone else had received a manual for proper behavior that I'd never been given. The afternoon sun climbed higher, turning the pool area into a showcase of summer luxury. Other families settled into their regular routines while I tried to lose myself in a magazine article about sustainable fashion, though my attention kept drifting to Emma's progress in the water. Watching her fearless approach to learning new skills reminded me of qualities I'd once possessed, but seemed to have misplaced somewhere along the way. "Maria, could you bring us a round of those delicious cucumber waters?" Brittany asked the poolside server, her tone friendly but clearly establishing the social dynamics that everyone was expected to understand. Maria Santos nodded with professional courtesy, though I caught a brief expression that suggested she'd witnessed these interactions many times before. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself growing warmer under my cover-up while watching other women move freely in their swimwear. The temperature was climbing toward the high 80s, and the pool looked increasingly inviting as Emma splashed happily with her fellow students. Several other mothers had shed their cover-ups to enjoy the sun, their confidence in their bodies both enviable and intimidating. "This heat is becoming unbearable," I finally admitted, more to myself than anyone else, though Brittany's group was close enough to overhear. "Oh, you should definitely cool off," Stephanie suggested with what sounded like genuine encouragement, though her eyes held that familiar calculating expression that made me question her motives. I stood and slowly removed my white cover-up, revealing the navy bikini I'd chosen so carefully that morning. The two-piece was conservative by Southern California standards, with modest coverage that I'd specifically selected to avoid unwanted attention. Yet the moment the fabric hit the lounge chair, I felt exposed and vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with the amount of skin showing. The silence that followed felt deafening, though it probably lasted only seconds. Brittany's perfectly shaped eyebrows raised slightly while Ashley's mouth formed a small O of surprise that she quickly concealed behind her water glass. Stephanie's reaction was the most obvious, her gaze traveling from my shoulders to my legs with unconcealed assessment. "Well," Brittany said finally, her voice carrying across the immediate area with crystal clarity, "aren't you brave to wear something so revealing?" The word revealing hung in the air like an accusation, though my bikini covered more than many of the other swimsuits around the pool. Something about her tone suggested that bravery wasn't necessarily a virtue, in this context, that perhaps I'd demonstrated poor judgment rather than confidence. Ashley nodded with sympathetic agreement, her expression suggesting she was witnessing someone make a regrettable mistake. "I always say it's better to be comfortable than sorry, you know? There are so many flattering one-piece options these days." The implication stung more than I'd expected, hitting insecurities I thought I'd moved beyond years ago. My body had carried and delivered a child, yes, but it had also achieved things these women couldn't imagine. Yet standing there in the California sunshine, I felt reduced to their narrow definitions of appropriate and acceptable. Maybe something with a little more coverage would be more suitable, Stephanie added helpfully, her tone suggesting she was offering valuable advice rather than delivering a coordinated attack on my confidence. That's when Brittany delivered the line that would change everything. Her voice pitched perfectly to carry to nearby families while maintaining the pretense of helpful concern. Seriously, Maya, maybe a one-piece would be more appropriate for someone with your body type. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The words hit like ice water despite the warm afternoon sun. Around us, conversations seemed to pause as other club members absorbed the public critique of my appearance. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger, though I couldn't immediately distinguish between the two emotions. What they didn't know as they exchanged those satisfied glances was that the body they were criticizing had once been featured in Sports Illustrated's swimsuit issue. What they couldn't see past their own insecurities was that I'd walked runways in Milan and posed for photographers whose names they'd recognize from magazine mastheads. What they failed to understand was that their attempt to diminish me was about to backfire in the most spectacular way imaginable. But in that moment, standing poolside with their words echoing across the azure pool complex, I felt exactly like they intended me to feel small, embarrassed, and completely out of place in my own skin. The woman who'd once commanded six-figure fees for a single photo shoot wanted nothing more than to grab her cover-up and disappear into the club's marble corridors. Instead, I forced myself to remain standing, fighting every instinct that urged me to cover up and apologize for existing. Something deep inside me, a remnant of the confidence I'd once worn as naturally as sunscreen, refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. "I think I'll take that swim now," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt as I moved toward the pool's edge. Behind me, I could hear Brittany's group murmuring among themselves, their mission accomplished as they'd successfully established their dominance over another perceived threat to their social order. They had no idea that their calculated cruelty was about to set in motion a chain of events that would reveal exactly who they'd chosen to target. The cool water felt like salvation as I slipped into the pool, letting the Pacific temperature embrace wash away the sting of their words. Emma waved enthusiastically from the shallow end where her lesson was concluding, her joy infectious enough to remind me that there were more important things than the opinions of insecure women. As I floated on my back, staring up at the cloudless California sky, I had no idea that within the next hour, everything would change. I couldn't have predicted that a chance encounter would force me to confront the parts of myself I'd been hiding for years, or that Brittany Morrison's attempt to humiliate me would become the catalyst for the most empowering afternoon of my recent life. The warm sun on my face and the gentle sound of water lapping against the pool's edges created a moment of peace that I desperately needed. Soon, Emma would finish her lesson and want me to swim with her, an activity that had become one of our favorite bonding experiences. For now, I could simply exist in the water without judgment or commentary, letting the familiar embrace of swimming restore some of the confidence that Brittany's group had tried to strip away. What I didn't know was that someone else had been watching the entire interaction, someone whose presence at Oceanview that afternoon was about to transform my carefully constructed new life in ways I never could have imagined. The water embraced me like an old friend, and for the first time in years, I felt my body remember what it was capable of. As I glided through the pool with smooth, practiced strokes, muscle memory kicked in from countless hours spent training in Olympic-sized pools and infinity edges overlooking Miami Beach. Each movement felt effortless and fluid, a stark contrast to the awkward self-consciousness I'd been carrying around the Oceanview crowd for months. Emma's swim lesson had concluded, and she paddled over to me with the fearless enthusiasm that only 7-year-olds possessed. Her coach, Tyler Johnson, lingered nearby, organizing equipment with the methodical precision that had made him such a respected instructor among the club's junior members. What I didn't realize was that Tyler had been watching my swimming technique with growing recognition, his trained eye picking up on details that most casual observers would miss. "Mommy, you're swimming so fast today," Emma giggled, attempting to match my pace with her developing backstroke. "You look like those ladies on TV who swim in the Olympics." Her innocent observation made my heart skip, though I forced myself to maintain the casual demeanor I'd perfected over the past 5 years. Swimming had always been my sanctuary, the one activity where I couldn't hide my natural ability and years of professional training. In the water, my body moved with a confidence that had been carefully trained out of it on dry land. "Just enjoying the beautiful day, sweetheart," I replied, though internally I was marveling at how good it felt to move without restraint, to let my body express the athleticism I'd spent years developing during my modeling career. From the poolside, I could see Brittany's group had settled into their premium cabana, their designer sunglasses creating perfect shields for what I knew were ongoing assessments of my every move. Their earlier comments still stung, but something about being in the water had restored a portion of my equilibrium. This was my element, even if they didn't know it. Tyler approached the pool's edge as Emma and I finished another lap, his expression thoughtful in a way that made me slightly nervous. During our previous interactions, he'd been friendly but professional, focusing entirely on Emma's development as a swimmer. Today, however, something in his demeanor suggested he was seeing me differently. "Mrs. Chen, I hope you don't mind me saying, but your technique is absolutely exceptional," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent years around elite athletes. "Have you competed at a high level? Your stroke mechanics are textbook perfect." The compliment sent a warm flush through my chest, though it also triggered immediate anxiety about maintaining my carefully constructed identity. Tyler's background as a former Olympic hopeful meant he could recognize professional-level training when he saw it, making him potentially dangerous to the anonymity I'd worked so hard to preserve. "I swam in college," I replied carefully, which was technically true, though it omitted the crucial detail that my college swimming had led directly to being discovered by modeling scouts who specialized in athletic builds. Tyler nodded with the understanding of someone who recognized evasion when he heard it, though his smile remained warm and encouraging. "Well, you've maintained your form beautifully. Emma's lucky to have a mom who can demonstrate proper technique." As we climbed out of the pool, I caught Maria Santos, the poolside server, watching our interaction with interest. Maria had always been kind to me, occasionally sharing knowing looks when Brittany's group was being particularly difficult. Her position at the club gave her a unique perspective on the social dynamics that played out daily around the Azure pool complex. "Mrs. Chen," Maria said quietly as she passed with a tray of refreshments, "you move in the water like a professional. Very impressive." Her observation was delivered with genuine admiration rather than suspicion, yet it added to my growing concern that my carefully maintained facade was beginning to crack. Each compliment about my swimming ability felt like a small breach in the wall I'd built around my former life. Emma and I settled back onto our lounge chairs, her chatter about swim techniques providing perfect cover for my racing thoughts. The afternoon sun was reaching its peak intensity, creating the kind of golden California light that photographers paid premium rates to capture. Around us, the club's social dynamics continued their familiar patterns, though I noticed several other members glancing in my direction with what seemed like newfound curiosity. "Maya, darling, that was quite a performance in the pool," Brittany called out from her cabana, her tone carrying multiple layers of meaning that I was still learning to interpret. "Where on earth did you learn to swim like that?" The question felt loaded with implications, though I couldn't determine whether she was genuinely curious or searching for ammunition to use against me later. Brittany's ability to make innocent inquiries sound like interrogations was one of her most unsettling talents. "I've always enjoyed swimming," I responded neutrally, hoping to avoid giving her any additional information she could weaponize during future social encounters. Ashley Parker leaned forward in her chair, her interest apparently piqued by the swimming discussion. "You really do have beautiful form. Have you considered joining our water aerobics group? We meet every Tuesday and Thursday morning." The invitation surprised me, though I suspected it came with strings attached that I couldn't yet identify. Brittany's group rarely extended genuine offers of inclusion without ulterior motives, making me wary of accepting anything that might draw me deeper into their social web. "That sounds lovely," I replied diplomatically, though my schedule is pretty packed with Emma's activities and volunteer commitments. Stephanie Walsh nodded with understanding that seemed only partially sincere. "Oh, of course. The demands of motherhood never end, do they? Though it's so important to maintain our own interests and physical fitness." The pause before physical fitness felt deliberate, another subtle reminder of their earlier criticism about my bikini choice. These women had perfected the art of delivering insults wrapped in concern, making it nearly impossible to confront their behavior without seeming overly sensitive or paranoid. As the afternoon progressed, I noticed Tyler Johnson engaged in conversation with Robert Sterling near the club's main entrance. Their discussion appeared serious, with both men occasionally glancing toward the pool area where I sat with Emma. A photographer's equipment bag sat nearby, though I couldn't determine who it belonged to or why professional photography equipment would be present during a casual afternoon at the club. Nicole Rodriguez, my closest friend and one of the few people who knew fragments of my previous life, arrived just as Emma was begging for another swim session. Nicole worked as a freelance journalist covering lifestyle and entertainment topics throughout Los Angeles, her career requiring her to navigate the same social circles that intimidated me so thoroughly. "Maya, you look absolutely radiant today," Nicole said, settling into the chair Jake had vacated earlier. "That bikini is stunning on you. Very Sports Illustrated." Her comment was delivered casually, but I caught the meaningful look she gave me as she mentioned Sports Illustrated. Nicole had been one of my few confidants during my modeling days, understanding the pressures and opportunities that came with that world in ways that my current social circle never could. "Just enjoying the sunshine," I replied, though Nicole's presence immediately made me feel more grounded and confident. From Brittany's cabana came the sound of not quite whispered conversation, their voices carrying just enough for nearby families to overhear discussions about appropriate poolside attire and the importance of understanding one's limitations. The passive-aggressive commentary was clearly directed at me, though delivered with enough plausible deniability to avoid direct confrontation. "Some people have such interesting ideas about what's flattering." Stephanie's voice drifted across the space between us. "I suppose confidence is admirable, even when it's misplaced." Nicole's eyebrows raised at the obvious dig, her journalist instincts immediately recognizing the dynamics at play. She'd encountered similar social hierarchies throughout her career, understanding how women like Brittany maintained power through carefully orchestrated campaigns of undermining and exclusion. "Ignore them," Nicole said quietly, though her expression suggested she was filing away information for potential future use. "They're obviously threatened by something, though I can't imagine what." Emma's enthusiasm for swimming provided the perfect excuse to return to the water, where I felt most like myself and least vulnerable to the social pressures that seemed to intensify whenever I remained stationary for too long. Nicole joined us, her presence transforming what had been a solitary activity into a celebration of friendship and shared joy. As we played with Emma in the shallow end, I noticed Cameron Davis setting up professional photography equipment near the club's main terrace. His presence at Oceanview was unusual, as the club typically restricted commercial photography except for special events or member requests. Cameron's reputation as one of the industry's most sought-after fashion and lifestyle photographers made his casual appearance even more intriguing. "Is that Cameron Davis?" Nicole asked, following my gaze, toward the photographer who was adjusting his camera settings with practiced efficiency. "I think so," I replied, though seeing him at the club sent an unexpected wave of anxiety through my chest. Cameron had been one of the photographers I'd worked with during my Sports Illustrated shoots, his ability to capture both athleticism and femininity making him a favorite among editors who wanted to showcase models' versatility. Nicole's expression shifted to one of recognition and concern as she realized the potential implications of Cameron's presence. She knew enough about my modeling background to understand that encountering former professional contacts was exactly the kind of situation I'd been carefully avoiding since retiring from the industry. "This could be interesting," Nicole murmured, her journalist instincts clearly engaged by the developing situation. Tyler Johnson approached Cameron with the easy familiarity of someone who'd been expecting his arrival, their conversation confirming that the photographer's presence was planned rather than coincidental. Robert Sterling joined them, his professional demeanor suggesting that whatever brought Cameron to Oceanview had official club approval. Emma's attention shifted to the photography equipment, with the curiosity that all children showed toward interesting gadgets and professional activities. "Mommy, why is that man taking pictures? Are we going to be on TV?" Her innocent questions drew attention from nearby families, including several members who began speculating about the purpose of Cameron's visit. The Oceanview community thrived on exclusive events and celebrity connections, making any unusual activity immediate fodder for gossip and social positioning. "He's probably here for a magazine article about the club," I replied, though my voice lacked conviction as I watched Cameron's methodical preparation process. Brittany's group had clearly noticed the photographer's arrival, their conversation becoming more animated as they speculated about his presence and potential opportunities to be featured in whatever publication had brought him to the club. Their earlier confidence about social hierarchies seemed momentarily shaken by the introduction of outside validation and professional recognition. "Ladies, we should definitely introduce ourselves," Brittany announced to her companions, her tone suggesting she was already planning her approach to Cameron. The afternoon took on an electric quality as word spread throughout the club about the photographer's presence. Members who had been contentedly lounging began primping and positioning themselves more strategically, the casual atmosphere transforming into something that resembled a casting call or audition. Cameron's assistant arrived with additional equipment, and what appeared to be release forms, confirming that his visit involved official photography rather than casual documentation. The professional setup suggested that whatever project had brought him to Oceanview was significant enough to warrant substantial time and resources. As Emma and I continued swimming, I found myself hyper-aware of Cameron's movements and the growing excitement among the club's female members. Several women had already approached him with varying degrees of subtlety, their attempts to insert themselves into whatever project he was working on, both amusing and familiar from my previous life, in the modeling industry. "Mrs. Chen," Tyler called from the pool's edge, "could I speak with you for a moment when you have a chance?" His request sent another spike of anxiety through my chest, though I couldn't determine whether his timing was coincidental or related to Cameron's presence. Tyler's position at the club gave him access to information and connections that other members lacked, making him potentially influential in ways I hadn't previously considered. Nicole gave me an encouraging nod as I climbed out of the pool, her presence providing emotional support, even though she couldn't protect me from whatever conversation Tyler wanted to have. Emma remained in the shallow end, happily practicing her kicks under the watchful eye of another instructor. "I hope you don't mind my asking?" Tyler began, his voice low enough to maintain privacy from nearby club members. "But I've been watching your swimming technique all afternoon, and it's absolutely extraordinary. Combined with your overall presentation, I think there might be an opportunity that would interest you." His careful phrasing suggested he knew more about my background than he'd previously let on, though I couldn't determine how much information he possessed or where he'd obtained it. The swimming community was relatively small at elite levels, making it possible that my reputation had persisted even after retirement. "What kind of opportunity?" I asked, though my voice betrayed the nervousness I was trying to conceal. Tyler glanced toward Cameron, who was now testing lighting conditions near the pool's infinity edge where the Pacific Ocean created a dramatic backdrop. "Cameron Davis is here scouting for a special project, something about celebrating women who embody both athleticism and elegance. Your swimming ability combined with your natural presence would be perfect for what he's looking for." The suggestion hit me like a physical blow, forcing me to confront the possibility that my carefully constructed anonymity was about to be challenged in the most public way possible. Working with Cameron again would inevitably lead to questions about my background and previous experience, potentially exposing the life I'd worked so hard to leave behind. "I appreciate the thought," I began carefully, "but I don't think I'm what he's looking for. I'm just a mom who enjoys swimming." Tyler's expression suggested he wasn't buying my modest deflection, though he seemed to respect my reluctance to pursue the opportunity. "Well, if you change your mind, I think you'd be surprised by how interested he might be." As I returned to Nicole and Emma, my mind raced through the implications of Tyler's suggestion and Cameron's presence at the club. The convergence of my former and current lives felt too significant to be mere coincidence, though I couldn't understand what forces had brought these elements together on this particular afternoon. "What did Tyler want?" Nicole asked, though her knowing expression suggested she could guess the general direction of our conversation. "He thinks I should talk to the photographer about some kind of project," I replied, my voice betraying more uncertainty than I'd intended. Nicole's response was immediate and decisive. "Maya, you know you should consider it. You've been hiding who you really are for too long. Maybe this is the universe giving you a chance to reclaim some of what you gave up." Her words resonated with a truth I'd been avoiding for years, the recognition that my retreat from professional modeling had been motivated by fear rather than genuine desire for anonymity. The woman who had once commanded premium rates for her work had gradually convinced herself that she was better off invisible, safer in the shadows than standing in the spotlight she'd once dominated. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific horizon, casting the pool area in the golden light that photographers called magic hour. Cameron had finished his setup and was now observing the club's social dynamics with the practiced eye of someone who understood how to capture authentic moments within artificial environments. Brittany's group had positioned themselves strategically within Cameron's line of sight, their earlier criticism of my appearance apparently forgotten in their eagerness to be discovered by a professional photographer. The irony of their sudden silence about inappropriate swimwear wasn't lost on me, though I found their transparency more amusing than offensive. As Emma and I prepared to gather our belongings and head home, I caught Cameron looking directly at me with an expression of recognition that made my heart skip several beats. After 5 years of anonymity, the moment I'd been dreading and secretly hoping for had finally arrived, bringing with it the potential to transform everything I thought I knew about my current life and future possibilities. Cameron Davis lowered his camera and walked directly toward me with the confident stride of someone who had just solved a puzzle that had been bothering him all afternoon. My pulse quickened as I recognized the expression on his face, the same look he'd worn 5 years ago when he'd first spotted me during a casting call in Miami. It was the look of a photographer who had found exactly what he'd been searching for. "Maya Thompson," he said, using my maiden name with absolute certainty. "I thought that was you, though I have to admit, it took me longer than usual to be sure. You look different somehow. More relaxed, maybe?" The sound of my former professional name spoken aloud at Oceanview Country Club felt surreal, like two completely separate worlds colliding in a way I'd never prepared for. Around us, conversations seemed to pause as other club members picked up on the familiarity in Cameron's tone and the obvious recognition between us. "Hello, Cameron," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same thing," he responded with the easy charm that had made him a favorite among models and editors throughout the industry. "Though I have to say, retirement clearly agrees with you. You look absolutely stunning." Emma tugged on my hand, confused by the sudden attention from a stranger and the obvious tension in my posture. Nicole moved closer, her protective instincts, activated by the shift in atmosphere and the growing curiosity from nearby club members who were beginning to realize they were witnessing something significant. "Mommy, who is this man?" Emma asked with the directness that only children possessed. "This is Mr. Davis," I explained, kneeling to her level while trying to project calm I didn't feel. "He's a photographer I used to work with a long time ago." Cameron's expression softened as he looked at Emma, his professional demeanor giving way to genuine warmth. "You must be Maya's daughter. She never mentioned having such a beautiful little girl when we worked together." The implication that we'd had personal conversations during our professional relationship wasn't lost on the growing audience of club members, though Cameron seemed oblivious to the social dynamics his presence was disrupting. His focus remained entirely on me, as if the years since our last collaboration had evaporated. From the corner of my eye, I could see Brittany's group straining to overhear our conversation, their earlier confidence replaced by obvious confusion about why a professional photographer was greeting me with such familiarity. Stephanie had her phone out, presumably researching Cameron's credentials to understand the significance of his recognition. "Actually," Cameron continued, his voice carrying enough for nearby listeners to hear clearly, "I've been thinking about you quite a bit lately. There's a project I'm working on that you'd be perfect for. Something about celebrating women who've maintained their strength and beauty beyond their 20s. The description sent a chill through me as I realized he was referring to sports. Illustrated's upcoming Where Are They Now feature, a retrospective on former swimsuit models who had transitioned into other phases of life. The irony that he'd found me at a country club pool while I was being criticized for wearing a bikini was almost too perfect to be coincidental. "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully, "but I'm not really available for modeling work anymore. My life has changed quite a bit since we last worked together." Tyler Johnson approached our group with obvious excitement, his earlier conversation with Cameron apparently having prepared him for this moment. "Mrs. Chen, I hope you don't mind, but I may have mentioned to Cameron that you have exceptional swimming ability. He's been looking for someone with your particular combination of skills." The revelation that Tyler had been discussing me with Cameron felt like a betrayal, though I realized he couldn't have known about my desire to maintain anonymity about my former career. His enthusiasm was genuine, even if it was threatening, to unravel everything I'd worked to keep private. "Maya Thompson," Ashley Parker said suddenly, her voice carrying across the pool area with crystal clarity. "Maya Thompson. Why does that name sound so familiar?" My maiden name spoken aloud by one of Brittany's circle created an immediate shift in the atmosphere around us. Several other club members turned their attention toward our group, their curiosity piqued by Ashley's obvious recognition and the growing drama of the situation. Nicole stepped closer to me, her protective instincts fully engaged as she recognized the potential for this encounter to spiral beyond my control. "Maya, maybe we should head home. Emma's probably getting tired." But it was too late for graceful exits. Stephanie had clearly found something on her phone, her expression transforming from confusion to shock as she stared at whatever information she'd discovered. The moment I'd been dreading for 5 years was unfolding in real time, with an audience of the exact people I'd hoped would never learn about my previous life. "Oh my God," Stephanie breathed, her voice loud enough to carry across the immediate area. "Maya Thompson, Sports Illustrated. You're that Maya Thompson." The words hung in the air like an explosion, creating a silence that felt deafening despite the ambient sounds of the pool and distant ocean. Every conversation within a 20-foot radius stopped as club members processed the implication that the woman they'd been casually dismissing was actually a former Sports Illustrated model. Cameron's face lit up with professional excitement as he realized the significance of this public revelation. The 2018 and 2019 swimsuit issues, he confirmed with obvious pride. Two of the most successful covers we ever shot. Maya was absolutely extraordinary to work with. Emma looked up at me with confusion and growing concern, sensing that something important was happening, but lacking the context to understand what it meant. Her innocent presence in the middle of this exposure felt both grounding and heartbreaking, as I realized her mother's carefully maintained secret was being broadcast to our entire social community. "I don't understand," Emma said quietly. "Mommy, what's Sports Illustrated?" Before I could formulate an age-appropriate explanation, Brittany Morrison stood up from her cabana and walked over with the careful precision of someone who realized she had just made a spectacular miscalculation. Her earlier confidence about appropriate swimwear and body types had evaporated, replaced by the dawning recognition of exactly who she'd been criticizing. "Maya," Brittany said, her tone completely different from the condescending warmth she'd displayed earlier. "I had no idea about your background. How exciting that you have such an interesting past." The attempt to reframe her earlier behavior as innocent ignorance rather than deliberate cruelty was transparent, though I found myself more amused than angry at her obvious discomfort. The woman who had spent the afternoon making subtle digs about my appearance was now faced with the reality that she'd been body-shaming a former Sports Illustrated model. "It's not something I generally discuss," I replied evenly, my voice carrying none of the uncertainty that had characterized my earlier interactions with her group. Robert Sterling had appeared at Cameron's side, his professional instincts clearly, engaged by the developing situation and its potential impact on club dynamics. As manager, he was undoubtedly calculating how to handle a scenario that could either enhance Oceanview's prestige or create uncomfortable social tensions among members. "Mrs. Chen, I had no idea we had such a distinguished former model amongst our membership," Robert said with genuine respect. "What an honor for the club." The formal recognition from club management seemed to shift the social dynamics around us, transforming me from an outsider trying to fit into someone whose presence elevated Oceanview's status. Other members who had previously ignored me were now approaching with obvious curiosity and newfound interest. "Maya, darling," called Jennifer Liu, a member I'd barely spoken to during my 3 years at the club. "You simply must tell us about your modeling career. How fascinating that you've been so modest about such impressive accomplishments." The sudden flood of attention felt overwhelming after years of deliberate anonymity, though I had to admit there was something liberating about no longer having to hide a significant portion of my identity. The weight of maintaining a false persona had been exhausting in ways I hadn't fully recognized until the burden was lifted. Cameron pulled out his phone and showed Emma a behind-the-scenes photo from one of our shoots, his gesture both kind and strategic as he helped her understand the context of our professional relationship. "Your mommy was one of the most professional models I ever worked with. She made every photograph better just by being in it." Emma studied the image with growing amazement, seeing her mother in a context that was completely foreign to her understanding of who I was. The woman in Cameron's photo radiated confidence and athletic grace, a stark contrast to the careful invisibility I'd cultivated at Oceanview. "That's really you, Mommy?" Emma asked, her voice filled with wonder and pride. "It really is," I confirmed, feeling a surge of emotion at her reaction. "It was my job before you were born." Nicole beamed with obvious satisfaction at seeing me finally acknowledge my achievements publicly, her support unwavering even as the situation grew more complex. Maya was amazing at it too. She was known for her athletic ability and natural grace in the water. The mention of my swimming ability seemed to connect several dots for Tyler, who had been observing our interaction with growing understanding. "That explains your incredible technique." You weren't just swimming in college. You were training for professional photo shoots. Cameron nodded enthusiastically, his photographer's eye clearly engaged by the setting and natural lighting around the pool. Maya was particularly gifted at underwater photography and action shots. She could hold her breath longer than most freedivers and move through water like she was born to it. The technical discussion of my former capabilities drew attention from several club members who had been avid swimmers themselves, their respect for professional-level athletic ability evident in their expressions and comments. The social hierarchy, that had seemed so fixed earlier, was clearly shifting as people recalibrated their understanding of my background and qualifications. "I remember those covers," said David Mitchell, approaching with his wife Sarah. "Incredible photography. You looked absolutely powerful and graceful at the same time." Sarah nodded with obvious admiration. "I kept those magazines because the images were so inspiring. You made swimming look like art." The growing crowd of admirers felt surreal after an afternoon of social rejection, though I found myself warming to the genuine appreciation being expressed by people who understood the difficulty and skill required for professional modeling work. These were conversations about craft and achievement rather than social positioning and artificial hierarchies. Ashley Parker remained notably quiet, her earlier suggestions about more appropriate swimwear now seeming absurd in the context of my professional background. The woman who had implied I should cover up had been critiquing someone whose body had been featured in the world's most prestigious swimsuit publication. "Maya," Cameron said, his voice taking on the persuasive tone I remembered from our working relationship. "I really think you should consider the project I mentioned. It's specifically about women who've transitioned from modeling into other successful phases of life. Your story would be perfect." The offer was tempting in ways I hadn't expected, awakening parts of my identity that I'd thought were permanently retired. The woman who had once loved the challenge of creating beautiful images was still there beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to emerge. What exactly would it involve? I heard myself asking, though part of me couldn't believe I was considering returning to a world I'd deliberately left behind. A feature spread about former Sports Illustrated models who found fulfillment in family life and other pursuits, Cameron explained. The focus would be on how you've maintained your strength and confidence while embracing new roles and responsibilities. Emma tugged on my hand again, her excitement growing as she began to understand the significance of the conversation happening around her. "Mommy, does this mean you're famous? Are you going to be in magazines again?" Her questions crystallized the reality of what I was contemplating. Accepting Cameron's offer would mean stepping back into public visibility, potentially affecting not just my own life, but Jake's career and Emma's school experience. The decision carried implications that extended far beyond personal fulfillment. "I'll need to think about it," I said, though my voice carried more interest than I'd intended to reveal. Brittany had been conferring quietly with Stephanie and Ashley. Their hushed conversation clearly focused on damage control and social repositioning in light of the afternoon's revelations. When she approached me again, her demeanor reflected a complete transformation from her earlier dismissive attitude. "Maya, I hope you'll forgive my earlier comments," Brittany said with what appeared to be genuine embarrassment. "I had no idea about your background, and I realize now how inappropriate my suggestions were." The apology was more direct than I'd expected, though I suspected it was motivated more by social calculation than genuine remorse. Still, her willingness to acknowledge her mistake publicly demonstrated a level of accountability that was rarely seen in Oceanview's social dynamics. "No harm done," I replied graciously, though we both knew her words had been intended to hurt and humiliate me. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across the pool area, and families were starting to gather their belongings for evening departures. The drama of my exposure had created a natural conclusion to what had been planned as a routine day at the club. though the implications would clearly extend far beyond this single afternoon. Cameron handed me his business card with obvious hope in his expression. "Please consider the project, Maya. I think you'd find it rewarding to show the world how beautifully you've evolved since our last collaboration." As Nicole helped me gather Emma's swim gear and toys, I found myself studying Cameron's card and contemplating possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider in years. The woman who had once thrived under professional photography lights was still part of who I was, even if I'd spent years trying to suppress that aspect of my identity. "Mrs. Chen," Tyler said as we prepared to leave, "I hope you know how much respect you've gained here today, not just for your modeling background, but for how gracefully you've handled everything." His comment reminded me that beyond the professional recognition and social repositioning, I had demonstrated something important about maintaining dignity under pressure. The woman who had felt small and embarrassed after Brittany's initial comments had emerged stronger and more confident by the end of the afternoon. Walking toward the club's parking area with Emma chattering excitedly about her famous mommy and Nicole providing steady emotional support, I realized that my carefully constructed anonymity had been shattered in the most public way possible. Yet instead of feeling exposed and vulnerable, I felt something approaching relief. The secret that had weighed on me for 5 years was finally out, and the consequences were far less catastrophic than I'd imagined. If anything, the revelation had improved my standing at Oceanview and opened possibilities that I'd thought were permanently closed to me. As we reached my car, Emma buckled herself into her seat while continuing to pepper me with questions about modeling and photography and whether she might be able to visit a real photo shoot someday. Her enthusiasm was infectious, reminding me that hiding my achievements had been depriving her of understanding the full scope of what was possible for women to accomplish. "Mommy," Emma said as I started the engine, "I think you should do the magazine again. You looked really happy in that picture Mr. Davis showed me." Her innocent observation hit me with unexpected force, highlighting a truth I'd been avoiding for years. The woman in Cameron's photographs had been happy, fulfilled, and confident in ways that I'd gradually lost while trying to fit into a social world that demanded I diminish myself for others' comfort. Nicole settled into the passenger seat with obvious satisfaction at the afternoon's developments. "Well, that was certainly dramatic. How are you feeling about everything?" "Terrified and exhilarated at the same time," I admitted, pulling out of the parking space while mentally preparing for the conversation I'd need to have with Jake about the day's revelations. The drive home through Malibu's winding coastal roads felt different than usual, as if the landscape itself had been transformed by my changed circumstances. The woman who had arrived at Oceanview that morning hiding behind modest swimwear and careful anonymity was returning home as someone who had been publicly recognized for professional achievements she'd spent years downplaying. By the time we would have reached our house, Emma had extracted a promise that I would at least consider Cameron's offer, her 7-year-old logic making it difficult to argue against the obvious benefits of pursuing opportunities that made me happy. Nicole had agreed to help me research the current state of the modeling industry and the specific requirements of Cameron's project. As we pulled into our driveway, I caught sight of Jake's car and realized that within minutes, I'd need to explain to my husband that his wife's secret modeling career had been exposed to our entire social community. The conversation would force us to confront aspects of our relationship that we'd both been avoiding, particularly my reasons for hiding such a significant part of my identity. Looking at myself in the rearview mirror, I saw someone who looked different than she had that morning. The woman staring back at me had reclaimed something essential that had been missing for years, even if the path forward remained uncertain and potentially challenging. The afternoon at Oceanview had changed everything, transforming a day that began with social humiliation into one that ended with professional recognition and personal empowerment. Whatever came next, I knew I could never return to the careful invisibility that had characterized my life for the past 5 years. The woman who had once graced the covers of Sports Illustrated was ready to step back into the light, even if she wasn't yet sure what that would mean for her carefully constructed life as Maya Chen. Jake was grilling salmon on our back deck. When we arrived home, the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly beyond our property line, while the early evening breeze carried the scent of jasmine from our neighbor's garden. His relaxed posture and content expression suggested he'd had a successful day on the golf course, completely unaware that his wife's carefully guarded secret had been exposed to half of Malibu's social elite. "How was the pool, ladies?" he called out cheerfully as Emma ran toward him with her usual post-swimming energy. "Daddy, Daddy, guess what?" Emma practically shouted, her excitement bubbling over as she launched into an animated retelling of the afternoon's events. "Mommy is famous." There was a photographer man who knew her from when she was in magazines, and everyone was so surprised, and Mrs. Morrison looked really funny when she found out. Jake's spatula paused mid-flip as he processed Emma's rapid-fire explanation, his expression shifting from casual interest to confusion, and finally to something approaching concern. His eyes found mine across the deck, searching for clarification about what our daughter was trying to tell him. "A photographer?" he asked carefully, his tone suggesting he was trying to piece together a puzzle from incomplete information. Nicole gave my shoulder an encouraging squeeze before tactfully suggesting she should head home, leaving me to navigate the conversation that would inevitably reshape the foundation of my marriage. As her car pulled out of our driveway, I felt the weight of 5 years of carefully maintained deception settling on my shoulders. "Jake, we need to talk," I said, settling onto one of our deck chairs while Emma continued chattering about her swimming lesson and the exciting discovery of her mother's hidden fame. "Sweetheart, why don't you go wash the chlorine out of your hair?" Jake suggested to Emma, his parental instincts recognizing that whatever conversation was about to happen required adult privacy. As Emma skipped inside, already planning to call her best friend about the day's revelations, Jake turned off the grill and sat across from me with the patient expression of someone preparing for significant news. His calm demeanor was one of the qualities that had first attracted me to him, though I wondered how that equanimity would hold up under the weight of everything I was about to reveal. "Cameron Davis showed up at Oceanview today," I began, watching Jake's face for any recognition of the name. "The photographer? I think I've heard of him. Fashion stuff, right?" Jake's response confirmed that he had no context for understanding the significance of Cameron's presence or his connection to my past. "Sports Illustrated," I corrected quietly. "He shoots for Sports Illustrated, among other publications. And, yes, he knew me because we worked together. Multiple times, actually." The words hung between us as Jake's expression shifted through several emotions: confusion, surprise, and growing realization. His analytical mind was clearly working to connect dots that would reshape his understanding of the woman he'd married. "Maya, what exactly are you telling me?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled in the way it became when he was processing unexpected information. "My maiden name was Maya Thompson," I said, each word feeling simultaneously liberating and terrifying. "I was a professional model for 4 years before we met. Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue primarily, though I did work for other magazines and brands." Jake sat back in his chair as if the revelation had physical weight, his expression cycling through disbelief, comprehension, and something that might have been hurt. The man who thought he knew everything important about his wife was discovering that she'd hidden an entire career and identity from him. "Sports Illustrated," he repeated slowly, as if testing the words. "You were in Sports Illustrated, and you never told me?" "I retired before we met," I explained, though even to my own ears the justification sounded inadequate. I wanted to start fresh, to be seen for who I was becoming rather than who I'd been. "But Maya, this is huge. This is a major part of your life, your identity. How could you just not mention it?" Jake's voice carried bewilderment rather than anger, though I could see hurt beginning to surface beneath his confusion. Emma's voice drifted down from upstairs as she talked excitedly on the phone to her friend, her innocent enthusiasm about her mother's revealed fame, providing a soundtrack to our increasingly tense conversation. The contrast between her joy and Jake's obvious distress highlighted the complexity of secrets and their eventual consequences. I was afraid, I admitted, the truth feeling raw and vulnerable in the ocean air. Afraid you'd see me differently, treat me differently. Afraid you'd think I was too much, too complicated, too public. Jake ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd learned to recognize as his processing mechanism for overwhelming situations. Maya, in 5 years of marriage, did you really think I'd judge you for having a successful career? For being accomplished and beautiful enough to model professionally? His questions forced me to confront the deeper insecurities that had motivated my deception. Fears that seemed increasingly irrational when spoken aloud to someone who'd consistently demonstrated love and support. The woman who'd been confident, enough to pose for international publications, had somehow convinced herself that her husband would find her success threatening. The industry can be complicated, I said weakly. There are assumptions people make, stereotypes about models. I didn't want to deal with that judgment, especially not from you. So instead, you decided to lie to me for 5 years? Jake's tone was growing sharper, the hurt becoming more prominent as he worked through the implications of my deception. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message from Cameron. Maya, I know today was unexpected, but I hope you'll seriously consider the project. The deadline for confirming participants is tomorrow evening. This could be exactly what you need to reclaim your confidence and show the world the woman you've become. Jake noticed my distraction and the timing of the message, his expression darkening as he realized the afternoon's revelations were just the beginning of decisions that would affect our family's future. What's that about? He asked, his voice tight with tension. Cameron offered me a modeling job, I said, immediately regretting my blunt delivery as Jake's face reflected shock and something approaching betrayal. A modeling job? Maya, our daughter, just discovered her mother used to be a famous model. I'm learning that my wife has been lying to me about a major part of her identity, and now you're considering going back to work that you never told me you'd done in the first place. The accumulation of revelations was clearly overwhelming him, and I could see our conversation heading toward territory that might cause permanent damage to our relationship. Yet something inside me refused to apologize for achievements I'd earned, or opportunities that excited me in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Jake, this isn't about lying to you. This is about me figuring out who I am and what I want from my life, I said, my voice gaining strength as I spoke. I've spent 5 years trying to be the perfect wife and mother, hiding parts of myself that I thought might make you uncomfortable. I never asked you to hide anything, Jake replied, his frustration evident. I fell in love with you exactly as you were when we met. If you'd told me about your modeling career, I would have been proud of you, supportive of you. His words carried the ring of truth, forcing me to acknowledge that my fears had been largely self-imposed rather than based on his actual reactions or attitudes. The man who'd consistently encouraged my interests and celebrated my small successes would likely have embraced my professional achievements if I'd given him the chance. Emma appeared in the doorway, her hair damp from the shower and her expression concerned as she picked up on the tension between her parents. Are you guys fighting about the magazine thing? Because I think it's really cool that Mommy was famous. Her innocent perspective cut through our adult complications with startling clarity, reminding us that children often grasped essential truths that adults overcomplicated with fear and insecurity. We're not fighting, sweetheart, Jake said, gently, though his reassurance lacked conviction. We're just talking about some big decisions. Can I see the magazines? Emma asked hopefully. Mr. Davis said you looked really beautiful in them, Mommy. The request hung between Jake and me, highlighting another layer of complexity I hadn't fully considered. If I accepted Cameron's offer and returned to modeling, even briefly, Emma would be exposed to her mother's professional history in ways that might affect her school relationships and social development. "We'll talk about it later, baby," I said, postponing a decision I wasn't ready to make while navigating the immediate crisis in my marriage. As Emma reluctantly headed inside to start her homework, Jake and I sat in silence while the sun continued its descent toward the Pacific horizon. The beautiful evening that should have been a celebration of Emma's swimming progress and our family time together had become a reckoning with deceptions and choices that threatened the stability we'd built together. "Maya, I need to understand something," Jake said finally, his voice calmer but still strained. "If you've been unhappy enough to hide major parts of yourself from me, what else about our marriage isn't working?" His question cut to the heart of issues we'd both been avoiding, forcing me to examine whether my deception about modeling was symptomatic of deeper problems in our relationship or simply the result of my own insecurities and fears. "It's not about being unhappy with you," I said carefully. "It's about being unhappy with who I became when I tried to fit into a world that expected me to be smaller than I actually am." "What world? Our world? Our friends?" Jake's confusion was genuine, and I realized he'd been largely oblivious to the social dynamics that had made me feel increasingly diminished over the years. The country club world, women like Brittany Morrison who make their power by making other women feel inadequate. I let them convince me that I needed to hide my accomplishments to be acceptable to them. Jake's expression shifted as he began to understand the social pressures I'd been navigating, pressures that had remained invisible to him as a man moving through those same spaces. The casual competitiveness and subtle undermining that characterized female relationships at Oceanview were foreign to his experience of golf games and business networking. "So today, when Cameron recognized you, all of that pretending became impossible," he said, working through the timeline of events. "Today, Brittany spent the afternoon telling me my body wasn't appropriate for a bikini," I explained. "Then Cameron showed up and publicly acknowledged me as a former Sports Illustrated model. The irony was intense. For the first time since our conversation began, Jake's expression showed a glimmer of amusement alongside his hurt and confusion. "I bet Brittany's rethinking her fashion advice right about now." She apologized, actually, very publicly, in front of everyone who heard her original comments. Jake shook his head with the bemused expression of someone trying to process social dynamics he'd never fully understood. "Maya, I'm still hurt that you hid this from me, but I'm starting to understand why you felt like you had to." My phone buzzed again with another message, this time from Nicole. "Jake handling the news okay? Remember, you have nothing to apologize for. Your achievements are yours to be proud of." The text reminded me that I had allies in this situation, people who understood the complexity of my choices and supported my right to reclaim parts of my identity that I'd unnecessarily sacrificed. "Who's that?" Jake asked, noticing my second distraction. "Nicole, checking on how you're taking the news," I replied honestly. "Nicole knew about your modeling career?" Jake's voice carried a new note of hurt as he realized the extent of the secret-keeping that had surrounded him. "She was one of my few friends from that time. She's the only person who knew both versions of me," I explained. Jake stood up and walked to the deck railing, his back to me as he stared out at the darkening ocean. The physical distance felt symbolic of the emotional gap that my revelations had created between us, though I hoped it wasn't permanent. "I feel like I don't know you," he said quietly. 5 years of marriage, and I discover my wife had this whole other life, this successful career, this confidence and strength that she's been hiding from me. "You do know me," I insisted, standing to join him at the railing. "The woman you fell in love with is real. The mother Emma adores is real. The wife who loves you completely is real. The modeling was just one part of who I was, not the totality of who I am." "But it's a part you thought I couldn't handle," Jake replied, his voice heavy with disappointment. "What does that say about what you think of me? What you think of our relationship?" His words hit me with the force of absolute truth, forcing me to confront the fact that my deception had been fundamentally unfair to him, regardless of my motivations. By assuming he couldn't accept my full identity, I'd denied him the opportunity to prove that assumption wrong. I was wrong, I said simply. I was scared and insecure, and I made decisions based on fear instead of trust. You deserved honesty from the beginning. Jake turned to face me, his expression softening slightly, though the hurt remained visible in his eyes. So what happens now? Cameron's offer? This project he wants you to do? Are you seriously considering it? The question forced me to examine my own desires honestly, stripping away the complications of social expectations and family dynamics to focus on what I actually wanted for myself and my future. I admitted, feeling both terrified and exhilarated to speak the truth aloud. For the first time in years, someone is offering me a chance to be proud of who I used to be instead of ashamed of it. And what about us? What about Emma? What about the life we've built together? Jake's voice carried genuine concern rather than selfishness, highlighting the legitimate complexities that my decision would create. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know how to balance wanting to reclaim part of myself with protecting the family I love. But I do know that hiding and diminishing myself isn't sustainable anymore. Emma's voice called from inside the house, asking for help with her math homework and inadvertently providing a reminder of the immediate responsibilities that would continue regardless of our marital crisis or my professional opportunities. We should table this for now, Jake said, his practical nature asserting itself. Emma needs dinner, homework help, and some stability while we figure out what comes next. As we moved inside to resume our evening routines, I caught my reflection in the sliding glass door and saw someone who looked fundamentally different than she had that morning. The woman staring back at me had stopped hiding, stopped apologizing, stopped making herself smaller for others' comfort. Whether that transformation would strengthen or damage my marriage remained to be seen. But I knew there was no returning to the careful invisibility that had characterized my life at Oceanview Country Club. The cat was out of the bag, the secret was exposed, and Maya Thompson was ready to reclaim her place in the world. The evening proceeded with artificial normalcy as we helped Emma with homework, prepared dinner, and maintained the family routines that had anchored our lives for years. Yet, underneath the domestic surface, fundamental questions simmered about identity, honesty, and the cost of authentic living. By the time Emma was tucked into bed, both Jake and I were emotionally exhausted from the day's revelations and their implications. We moved around each other carefully, like dancers learning new choreography, neither quite sure how to navigate this altered version of our relationship. Maya, Jake said as we prepared for bed, I need some time to process all of this. The lying, the modeling career, this new opportunity, it's a lot to absorb. I understand, I replied, though his request for space felt like another small rejection of who I was becoming. But I want you to know that I'm proud of what you accomplished, he continued, his voice carrying the warmth that had first attracted me to him. I just wish I'd been allowed to be proud of it for the past 5 years. His words carried both forgiveness and reproach, highlighting the complexity of repairing trust while moving forward into uncertain territory. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Jake slept beside me, I realized that tomorrow would bring decisions that would affect not just my career, but the fundamental structure of our family life. Cameron's deadline loomed less than 24 hours away, and I still had no clear answer about whether I was ready to step back into the world I'd left behind. The woman who'd been criticized for wearing a bikini that morning was now being invited to model professionally again, a reversal so dramatic it felt almost fictional. Yet the most important relationship in my life hung in the balance, damaged by years of unnecessary deception and threatened by choices that could pull me away from the domestic stability I'd worked so hard to create. The path forward required navigating between authentic self-expression and family loyalty, between professional fulfillment and marital harmony. As sleep finally claimed me, I dreamed of swimming in endless blue water, moving with the grace and confidence I'd once possessed. Naturally, in the dream, there was no audience to judge my body, no critics to question my choices, no complicated decisions about identity and image. There was only movement, strength, and the pure joy of being completely myself in my element. Morning would bring clarity or chaos, but tonight, in the space between sleeping and waking, I allowed myself to remember what it felt like to be powerful, graceful, and unapologetically visible to the world. The morning sun streamed through our bedroom windows as I woke to find Jake already dressed and sitting in the chair by our bed, a cup of coffee in his hands and an expression of determined resolution on his face. The sight of him waiting for me to wake up sent a flutter of anxiety through my chest, unsure whether his overnight contemplation had led to acceptance or ultimatum. "Good morning," I said carefully, sitting up and trying to read his mood from his posture and expression. "I've been thinking all night," Jake began, his voice carrying the weight of serious decision. "About us, about your modeling career, about the lies and the reasons behind them. And I've come to some conclusions." My heart raced as I prepared for whatever verdict he'd reached during his sleepless hours of reflection. The man who'd discovered his wife's secret identity less than 24 hours ago held the power to either support my transformation or demand I return to the diminished version of myself I'd been hiding behind. "I was hurt yesterday, and I'm still hurt," he continued, meeting my eyes directly. "Not because you were a successful model, but because you didn't trust me enough to share that success with me. You robbed me of 5 years of being proud of my accomplished wife." His words stung because they were absolutely true, forcing me to confront the full scope of how my deception had affected not just me, but the man who'd loved me without knowing the complete truth about who I was. "But I've also been thinking about why you felt like you had to hide," Jake said, his tone softening slightly. "And I realized that maybe I haven't been paying enough attention to the pressures you've been dealing with, especially from people like Brittany Morrison." The acknowledgement that he'd begun to understand the social dynamics I'd been navigating felt like a small victory, though I knew it didn't excuse the years of unnecessary secrecy. "Jake, I began, but he held up a hand to indicate he wasn't finished. "I called Cameron Davis this morning," he said, and my breath caught in my throat. "I got his number from the club directory and told him I was your husband. We had a very interesting conversation." The revelation that Jake had contacted Cameron without consulting me first felt both invasive and oddly supportive, as if he'd taken action to understand my world rather than simply judging it from the outside. "What did you talk about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He told me about your reputation in the industry, how professional you were, how respected, how you were known for your athletic ability and natural grace. He said you were one of the few models who never developed an ego or attitude problem, that you treated everyone on set with kindness and respect." Jake's recounting of Cameron's assessment felt like hearing about a stranger, someone I'd almost forgotten I used to be. The confident, capable woman who'd earned respect in a notoriously difficult industry seemed like a character from another lifetime. "He also told me about the project he's offering you," Jake continued. "It's not just any modeling job, Maya. It's specifically about women who've transitioned from modeling into other meaningful phases of life, women who've maintained their strength and confidence while embracing new roles." The detailed description of Cameron's project sounded more appealing when filtered through Jake's explanation, less like a step backward into my past, and more like an integration of who I'd been with who I'd become. "And?" I prompted, still uncertain about where this conversation was leading. "And I think you should do it," Jake said firmly. "I think you should take the job, work with Cameron again, and show the world, and yourself, that Maya Thompson and Maya Chen are the same person." You don't have to choose between being a successful model and being a devoted wife and mother. The support I'd hoped for but never dared to expect hit me like a physical force, bringing tears to my eyes as I realized that Jake's overnight reflection had led him toward acceptance rather than rejection. But there are conditions, he added, his tone becoming more serious. No more lies. No more hiding parts of yourself because you think I can't handle them. If we're going to make this work, I need complete honesty about who you are and what you want. I promise, I said immediately, meaning it with every fiber of my being. No more secrets, no more hiding. You deserve to know all of me. Jake stood and sat on the edge of the bed, reaching for my hands with the gentle touch that had first made me fall in love with him. Maya, I married you because I saw strength and beauty and intelligence that took my breath away. If I'd known about your modeling career, I would have been even more impressed, not less. His words dissolved the last of my fears about his reaction, replacing years of anxiety with the warm certainty that I'd chosen the right partner for navigating life's complexities. There's something else, Jake said, his expression shifting to something that looked almost like excitement. Cameron wants to do part of the shoot here, at our house with our family. He said the story isn't complete without showing the life you've built since modeling. The prospect of bringing my two worlds together so completely felt both thrilling and terrifying, but also fundamentally right. If this project was truly about integration rather than regression, then including Jake and Emma in the narrative made perfect sense. How do you feel about that? I asked, still hardly believing this was the same man who'd been hurt and confused less than 24 hours earlier. I feel like it's time for me to be publicly proud of my wife, Jake replied with a smile that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. Emma's voice echoed from downstairs as she called for breakfast, her cheerful energy providing a reminder that our family dynamics would need to accommodate this new chapter while maintaining the stability she needed. What about Emma? I asked. How do we explain to a 7-year-old that her mother is going back to modeling? We tell her the truth, Jake said simply, that mommy is really good at something special, and sometimes it's important to use our talents to help other people see that they can be proud of who they are too. His framing of the project in terms that Emma could understand and support showed me once again why Jake was such a natural father and partner. His ability to find the positive aspects of challenging situations had always been one of his greatest strengths. As we headed downstairs to start our day, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of secrecy and diminished identity was lifting, replaced by the possibility of authentic living and integrated success. Emma was already dressed for school and eating cereal at our kitchen island, her hair still damp from her morning shower and her backpack packed for another day of second-grade adventures. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, kissing the top of her head while marveling at how normal this routine felt despite the seismic shifts in my personal life. "Mommy, are you going to be in magazines again?" Emma asked immediately, her directness cutting through any possibility of avoiding the conversation. "I think I might be," I replied, sitting beside her while Jake prepared coffee for both of us. "Would that be okay with you?" Emma's face lit up with excitement that seemed entirely genuine and uncomplicated by the adult concerns that had kept me awake most of the night. "That would be so cool. Can I tell my friends?" "You can tell them that Mommy used to be a model and might do some more modeling work," I said carefully. "But remember that it's just one part of who I am. I'm still your mom first and always." "I know that," Emma said with the matter-of-fact tone that children used when adults stated obvious facts. "But I think it's really neat that you're good at so many things." Her uncomplicated acceptance of my multiple identities reminded me that the integration I'd been struggling with was primarily an adult problem. Children naturally understood that people could be many things simultaneously without contradiction or conflict. The drive to Emma's school felt different that morning, as if the familiar route through our neighborhood had been transformed by my altered perspective on myself and my possibilities. Jake held my hand across the center console, while Emma chattered from the back seat about swimming lessons and math tests and whether she might be able to visit a photo shoot someday. "I'll call Cameron after I drop Emma off," I said as we pulled into the school parking lot. "I want to discuss the details of the project and make sure I understand exactly what's involved." "Good," Jake replied. "And Maya? I want to be involved in those conversations. If this is going to affect our family, I want to understand all the implications." His request for inclusion felt like the natural result of our commitment to honesty and transparency moving forward. The decisions that had once felt like mine alone to make were now properly recognized as family decisions that required input from everyone who would be affected. After Emma skipped into her classroom with her usual enthusiasm, Jake and I sat in the car for a few minutes discussing practical considerations about the modeling project. Scheduling, travel requirements, childcare arrangements, and the potential impact on our social life at Oceanview all needed to be considered and addressed. "I should probably call Brittany Morrison and thank her," I said with a laugh that held more irony than humor. "Thank her?" Jake asked, clearly confused by the suggestion. If she hadn't been so cruel yesterday, I might never have been forced to confront my own hiding and pretending. Her attempt to humiliate me ended up liberating me. Jake shook his head with bemused amazement. "Only you would find a way to be grateful to someone who tried to shame you for wearing a bikini." "She did me a favor, even if that wasn't her intention," I replied. "Sometimes we need external pressure to force us into changes we've been avoiding." The drive home gave us time to discuss more details about integrating my renewed modeling career with our family life and social commitments. Jake's practical questions helped me think through logistics I hadn't fully considered, while his emotional support made the entire prospect feel manageable rather than overwhelming. Cameron answered his phone on the first ring, his voice carrying obvious excitement and relief when I identified myself. "Maya, I was hoping you'd call. Have you made a decision about the project?" "Yes," I said, feeling a surge of confidence that I hadn't experienced in years. "I'd like to participate, but I have some conditions and questions that need to be addressed." "Of course. What can I clarify for you?" Over the next 30 minutes, Cameron and I discussed every aspect of the project in detail. The timeline, the concept, the specific images he wanted to capture, and the story arc that would connect my modeling past with my current life as a wife and mother. His vision was both respectful and empowering, focusing on evolution rather than regression. "I'd like my husband to be present during all the planning conversations," I said, establishing one of my non-negotiable requirements. "This affects our family, and he should be part of the decision-making process." "Absolutely," Cameron agreed immediately. "Actually, I'd love to meet him. Based on our conversation this morning, he sounds like exactly the kind of partner who would enhance, rather than complicate this project." The ease with which Cameron accepted my conditions reinforced my sense that this opportunity was fundamentally different from the modeling work I'd done before marriage and motherhood. This was about celebrating integration rather than compartmentalization. "When can we start?" I asked, surprising myself with my eagerness to begin. "I'd like to do a preliminary shoot next week, just to test some concepts and get reacquainted with working together," Cameron replied. "Then we can schedule the main shoot for the following week, including the family portions at your house." The timeline felt both exciting and terrifying, but I knew that hesitation would only give my insecurities time to resurface and potentially derail my decision. "Let me confirm with Jake and check Emma's school schedule," I said. "But tentatively, yes. Let's do this." After ending the call with Cameron, I sat in our kitchen feeling simultaneously nervous and exhilarated about the commitment I'd just made. The woman who'd hidden her achievements for 5 years had just agreed to showcase them in a national publication, complete with family integration and public exposure. Jake found me there when he returned from his morning meetings, his expression immediately shifting to concern when he saw my face. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently. "Third and fourth thoughts," I admitted, but also excitement and anticipation and a sense that this is exactly what I need to do. "Tell me about the conversation with Cameron," Jake said, settling beside me at our kitchen island with the patient attention that had always made him such a good listener. I recounted every detail of our discussion, from the creative concept to the practical logistics to the timeline that would see us fully committed to the project within 2 weeks. Jake asked thoughtful questions and offered practical suggestions, his engagement confirming that his support was genuine rather than reluctant. "There's something else we need to discuss," I said, broaching a topic that had been weighing on my mind since yesterday's revelations. "What happens at Oceanview now that everyone knows about my background?" Jake considered the question seriously, understanding that the social dynamics at the country club would inevitably shift in response to my changed status within the community. "I think you'll find that most people are impressed and respectful," he said, "and the ones who aren't probably weren't worth your energy anyway." His pragmatic approach to social relationships had always been one of his strengths, helping me navigate situations where my tendency toward people-pleasing sometimes led to accepting treatment I didn't deserve. Brittany Morrison called this morning, I said, producing my phone to show him the voicemail notification I'd been avoiding. "What did she say?" Jake asked, his tone suggesting he was prepared for anything from apology to attack. I played the message on speaker, both of us listening as Brittany's voice filled our kitchen with what sounded like genuine contrition. "Maya, this is Brittany. I wanted to call and properly apologize for my behavior yesterday. I was completely out of line, and I realize now how hurtful my comments must have been. I hope you'll give me a chance to make this right. I'd love to take you to lunch this week if you're available." Jake raised his eyebrows at the conciliatory tone, clearly surprised by Brittany's apparent change in attitude. "Are you going to call her back?" he asked. "I think I will," I said, realizing that part of moving forward authentically meant engaging with people directly rather than avoiding difficult conversations. "Not because I need her approval, but because I'm curious about whether her apology is genuine or strategic. Either way, you'll handle it with more grace than she showed you," Jake said with the confidence in my character that had always been one of his most attractive qualities. The afternoon brought a steady stream of phone calls and text messages from friends, acquaintances, and even some strangers who had heard about yesterday's revelations at Oceanview. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with people expressing admiration for my modeling career and excitement about my return to the industry. Nicole arrived for lunch with a bottle of champagne and a folder full of printouts from social media and entertainment blogs that had already picked up the story of my comeback. The speed with which news traveled in the digital age was both thrilling and slightly terrifying. "You're officially a trending topic," Nicole announced with obvious delight. "Former Sports Illustrated model emerges from retirement for empowerment project. The angle is perfect." Seeing my story reduced to headlines and social media posts felt surreal, as if I were reading about someone else's life rather than my own transformation. Yet the positive response gave me confidence that my decision to embrace visibility again was resonating with people beyond my immediate circle. "Any negative reactions?" I asked, knowing that public exposure inevitably attracted both supporters and critics. "A few trolls questioning why anyone cares about a former model's comeback," Nicole replied dismissively. "But the overwhelming response is celebration and inspiration. Women are sharing their own stories about hiding their accomplishments and feeling encouraged to be more authentic. The idea that my personal journey might inspire others to embrace their own hidden strengths felt like validation of the deeper purpose behind Cameron's project. This wasn't just about my individual transformation, but about challenging broader cultural expectations that encouraged women to diminish themselves. Emma arrived home from school bubbling with excitement about Her classmates' reactions to her mother's revealed identity. Apparently, several children had recognized me from magazines their mothers kept, while others were simply impressed by the glamorous concept of having a model for a mom. "Mrs. Peterson wants to know if you'll come talk to our class about being a model," Emma announced. She said it would be a great example of how people can have different kinds of jobs and talents. The request for a classroom visit felt both flattering and nerve-wracking, representing another step toward full integration of my past and present identities. Speaking to second graders about career diversity and personal authenticity would require distilling complex concepts into age-appropriate messages. "What do you think, sweetheart?" I asked Emma. "Would you like me to visit your class?" "Yes," Emma replied immediately. "I want all my friends to meet you and see how cool you are." Her enthusiasm was infectious, reminding me that authenticity often required courage, but also brought genuine rewards in the form of deeper connections and more meaningful relationships. The evening brought our first real test of navigating social situations with my revealed identity, when Jennifer Liu called to invite us to a dinner party she was hosting for several Oceanview families. The guest list included many of the people who had witnessed yesterday's dramatic revelation, making the event both an opportunity and a potential minefield. "I think we should go," Jake said after we discussed the invitation. "Hiding from social situations now would undermine everything you've accomplished by being open about your background." His logic was sound, though the prospect of facing a room full of people who were still processing the gap between their assumptions about me and the reality of my achievements felt daunting. "Besides," Jake continued with a grin, "I'm looking forward to being introduced as the husband of Maya Thompson, instead of having you introduced as Jake Chen's wife." His perspective shift highlighted one of the unexpected benefits of my revelation. Jake had always been proud of me as a person, but now he could be proud of me as a professional equal with documented achievements that commanded respect. The dinner party took place 3 days later at Jennifer's elegant home overlooking the Pacific, with a guest list that read like a who's who of Oceanview's social hierarchy. As we walked through the front door, I felt every conversation pause momentarily, before resuming with what seemed like heightened energy and interest. "Maya, darling, you look absolutely radiant." Jennifer greeted me with warmth that felt more genuine than most of my previous interactions at similar events. "I've been telling everyone how excited I am to get to know the real you." The phrase "real you" encapsulated the fundamental shift in how people were relating to me. Instead of treating me as an accessory to Jake's identity or a generic wealthy wife, they were engaging with me as an individual with my own accomplishments and expertise. Brittany Morrison approached within minutes of our arrival, her demeanor carrying none of the competitive edge that had characterized our previous interactions. Instead, she seemed nervous and genuinely apologetic as she prepared to address her behavior at the pool. "Maya, I'm so glad you came," Brittany said, her voice carrying sincerity that I'd never heard from her before. "I've been hoping for a chance to properly apologize for my comments the other day. I was completely out of line, and I'm genuinely sorry." "Thank you for the apology," I replied graciously. "I appreciate you taking the time to reflect on what happened." "I've been doing a lot of reflecting," Brittany continued, "about why I felt the need to criticize you, about my own insecurities, about the way women sometimes tear each other down instead of building each other up." Her candor was surprising, suggesting that my revelation had forced her to examine her own behavior and motivations in ways that went beyond simple social damage control. Throughout the evening, I found myself engaged in conversations that were fundamentally different from any I'd had in previous Oceanview social gatherings. Instead of discussing shopping and charity committee politics, people wanted to hear about the modeling industry, creative collaboration, and the challenges of balancing career and family. What was it like working with such famous photographers? asked Sarah Mitchell, her question carrying genuine curiosity, rather than the superficial interest that had characterized most of our previous interactions. Collaborative and creative, I replied honestly. The best shoots felt like artistic partnerships, where everyone contributed to creating something beautiful. David Mitchell joined our conversation with obvious respect for the professional expertise I'd developed during my modeling career. It must have required incredible discipline and athletic ability. The physical demands alone would be challenging. His recognition of the skill and effort required for professional modeling felt validating in ways I hadn't expected. For years, I had internalized societal assumptions that modeling was somehow less legitimate than other careers, but speaking about it openly reminded me of the genuine expertise I'd developed. As the evening progressed, I realized that embracing my complete identity had fundamentally altered not just how others saw me, but how I saw myself. The woman who'd once felt like an imposter in social situations was now confidently discussing her professional experience and future projects. Jake moved through the party with obvious pride, no longer needing to compensate for my perceived social deficits or professional limitations. Instead, he could simply enjoy being married to someone whose accomplishments complemented rather than competed with his own. I have to admit, he said during a quiet moment on Jennifer's terrace, I'm enjoying this version of you much more than the one who apologized for existing. His observation highlighted how much energy I'd been expending on trying to be smaller and less threatening to others. The relief of dropping that exhausting performance was allowing me to engage with people more naturally and authentically. The following week brought the first photo shoot with Cameron, a preliminary session designed to test concepts and reestablish our working relationship. Walking into the studio felt like stepping back into a world I'd almost forgotten, filled with professional equipment, creative energy, and collaborative possibility. Maya, you look incredible, Cameron said as his team prepared lighting and background elements. Even more confident than I remember from our previous work together. The compliment felt earned rather than flattering, reflecting genuine changes in how I carried myself and engaged with the world. The woman approaching the camera was neither the insecure club member who'd hidden behind cover-ups, nor the young model who'd been learning to navigate a complex industry. This was someone who had integrated multiple aspects of her identity into a coherent and confident whole. The first shots focused on athletic grace, capturing me in and around a pool that reminded me of the Oceanview setting where my transformation had begun. Moving through the water felt natural and powerful, my body remembering the confidence and capability that had made me successful in this field. Beautiful, Cameron called out, as he captured images of me swimming. You've maintained that natural athleticism that made our original work so compelling. Jake watched from the side of the studio, his presence providing emotional support while also satisfying his desire to understand this aspect of my professional life. Seeing him observe my work with obvious pride and interest made the experience feel like a celebration rather than a regression. This is amazing, he said during a break between setups. Watching you work, seeing how professional and confident you are, it's like seeing a part of you that I never knew existed. His words reminded me that this project was serving multiple purposes, reclaiming my professional identity, inspiring others through my story, and allowing my husband to see the complete woman he'd married. The final setup of the day focused on the integration theme that would define the entire project. Cameron wanted to capture images that showed me as both a former model and a current mother and wife, someone who had successfully navigated the transition between different phases of life. The goal is to show that evolution doesn't require abandoning who you were, Cameron explained as he adjusted his camera settings. You're still the same person who graced magazine covers, but you've added layers of experience and wisdom that make you even more compelling. The shoot concluded with images of me in elegant but understated clothing, representing the sophisticated woman I'd become while maintaining the confidence and grace that had characterized my modeling career. These photos would bridge the gap between my public past and my private present, showing viewers that growth and change didn't require hiding previous achievements. Driving home from the studio, I felt energized and accomplished in ways I hadn't experienced since before Emma was born. The work had reminded me of skills I possessed and creativity I'd been suppressing, while also confirming that I could integrate professional fulfillment with family responsibilities. "How are you feeling about everything?" Jake asked as we navigated Los Angeles traffic toward home. "Like myself again," I replied honestly. "Like all the different parts of who I am finally fit together instead of competing with each other." The main photo shoot was scheduled for the following week at our house, where Cameron would capture the family integration that formed the heart of his project concept. Emma's excitement about being included in professional photographs was infectious, while Jake's willingness to participate showed his complete commitment to supporting my authentic self-expression. The morning of the family shoot arrived with perfect California weather and an atmosphere of celebration rather than stress. Cameron and his team arrived early to set up equipment and plan shots that would showcase our home and family dynamic, while maintaining the artistic quality required for publication. "The goal is to show real life," Cameron explained to Jake and Emma as they prepared for their first professional photo session. "I want to capture the authentic love and connection that exists in your family." Emma took to modeling like she'd been born for it, her natural confidence and joy in front of the camera suggesting she might have inherited some of my comfort with being photographed. Jake was more reserved initially, but Cameron's direction helped him relax into poses that felt natural rather than artificial. The images Cameron captured that day told the story of a woman who had successfully integrated all aspects of her identity. Photos of me swimming in our pool while Emma cheered from the sidelines, intimate moments with Jake in our kitchen, and family portraits that showcased our genuine connection and happiness. "These are going to be beautiful," Cameron said, as he reviewed the digital images on his camera's display. "The story of transformation and integration is coming through in every shot." The article accompanying the photos was scheduled to run in the next month's issue, with additional online content that would include behind-the-scenes footage and extended interviews about the challenges and rewards of authentic living. 3 weeks after the family shoot, advance copies of the magazine arrived at our house. Seeing my image on the cover with the headline, "Maya Thompson, Redefining Success After Sports Illustrated," felt surreal and deeply satisfying simultaneously. Emma's reaction to seeing her family featured in a national publication was pure joy and pride. "Mommy, we look so happy in these pictures," she said, studying each image with the careful attention of someone who understood their significance. Jake's response was more emotional, his voice catching slightly as he read the article that detailed my journey from successful model to hidden wife to integrated woman embracing all aspects of her identity. "I'm so proud of you," he said, wrapping his arms around me as we sat together on our living room couch. "Not just for the modeling career, but for having the courage to stop hiding who you really are." The magazine's publication brought another wave of positive response, with messages from women across the country who saw their own struggles with authenticity reflected in my story. Many shared their own experiences of diminishing themselves in relationships or social situations, expressing gratitude for seeing an example of successful integration. The most meaningful response came from Emma's teacher, who used the magazine article as a teaching tool for discussing how people could have multiple talents and roles without contradiction. The lesson sparked conversations among the children about their own parents' diverse skills and backgrounds, encouraging them to see adults as complex individuals rather than single-role figures. 6 months after that transformative afternoon at Oceanview Country Club, I stood on the same pool deck where Brittany Morrison had criticized my bikini choice. This time, I was there for a charity photo shoot benefiting the club's youth swimming program, wearing a designer swimsuit that celebrated rather than concealed my athletic build. Brittany approached with a smile that seemed genuinely warm rather than calculated. "Maya, you look absolutely stunning. I'm so glad you agreed to do this fundraiser shoot." Her complete transformation from critic to supporter might have seemed hypocritical, but I'd come to understand that her earlier behavior had been motivated by her own insecurities rather than genuine malice. Seeing her growth alongside my own felt like evidence that authentic living could inspire positive changes in others. "Thank you for organizing this," I replied sincerely. "Using my platform to support youth athletics feels like the perfect way to give back to the community." The charity shoot raised significant funds for the swimming program, while also providing an opportunity to mentor young athletes about confidence, body positivity, and pursuing their dreams regardless of others' expectations or limitations. Tyler Johnson, who had been instrumental in connecting me with Cameron that first day, now served as the program's head instructor. His recognition of my abilities had been the catalyst for everything that followed, making him an unexpected hero in my story of transformation. "I knew there was something special about you from the moment I saw you swim," he said, as we watched a group of young swimmers practice their strokes. "I'm glad you found the courage to let the world see it too." The afternoon concluded with impromptu swimming demonstrations and informal mentoring sessions with young athletes who were inspired by the story of someone who had turned apparent criticism into career opportunity. Their enthusiasm reminded me that authenticity not only benefited the individual choosing it, but also provided positive examples for others facing similar challenges. Jake joined us for the final portion of the event, bringing Emma, who was now an accomplished swimmer in her own right. Watching my daughter move through the water with confidence and joy, unencumbered by the insecurities that had plagued my own journey, felt like the ultimate victory. "She's going to be even better than you were," Cameron said, taking candid shots of Emma's swimming technique for potential future projects. "She's going to be whoever she wants to be," I replied, feeling the deep satisfaction of a parent who had learned to model authenticity rather than hiding. As the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, painting the Oceanview pool deck in golden light, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from hiding to wholeness. The woman who had once been ashamed of her achievements was now using them to inspire others and support causes she cared about. The bikini that had sparked Brittany's criticism now represented something entirely different: the courage to be completely yourself, regardless of others' expectations or limitations. What had begun as an attempt to humiliate me had become the catalyst for reclaiming my authentic identity and inspiring others to do the same. Walking to our car with Jake and Emma, I felt grateful for every aspect of the journey that had led to this moment. The criticism that had stung, the revelation that had initially threatened my marriage, and the risks I'd taken to embrace my complete self had all contributed to a life that felt genuinely fulfilling. "Mom," Emma said as we drove home through the Malibu hills, "I hope when I grow up I'm brave enough to be good at lots of things like you are." Her words encapsulated everything I'd hoped to achieve through my transformation. By choosing authenticity over approval, confidence over concealment, and integration over compartmentalization, I'd created a legacy that extended far beyond magazine covers or social media attention. The woman who had once hidden her light under a bushel was now shining brightly enough to illuminate possibilities for others. The former Sports Illustrated model had become something even more valuable: a role model for living authentically, in a world that often pressured women to be smaller than they actually were. As we pulled into our driveway, I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror and saw someone who looked completely at peace with all aspects of her identity. The integration I'd struggled to achieve for years was now natural and effortless, allowing me to move through the world as my complete self, rather than a carefully edited version designed to make others comfortable. The journey from the country club pool to this moment of authentic fulfillment had taught me that the opinions of insecure people were far less important than the approval of the woman in the mirror. When I finally had the courage to like and respect myself completely, everything else fell into place with surprising ease. Tonight, I would sleep peacefully, knowing that my daughter was growing up seeing an example of a woman who refused to dim her light for anyone. Tomorrow, I would wake up ready to continue using my platform and story to encourage others to embrace their own authentic power. The bikini controversy that had seemed so devastating just months ago now felt like the greatest gift I'd ever received. Sometimes the universe sends us exactly the catalyst we need, even when it comes disguised as criticism from people who don't understand our worth. I was no longer hiding, no longer apologizing, no longer making myself smaller for others' comfort. I was Maya Thompson-Chen, former Sports Illustrated model, devoted wife and mother, inspiration to other women, and living proof that authenticity always wins in the end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.